or good evening. I am delighted to be here with you today. I've just arrived at IAS-UM6P, and I've just started a fellowship at the IAS. And I'm enthusiastic of this opportunity. It comes in a very good moment of my career. And I will explain why while we speak, okay? So the title of the presentation is Reimagining Education through TEP, AI, and Innovation. In addition to being a resident here now, I have also a startup called No IWE, No Innovation Without Education, through which I have developed an educational model that I call TEP, which I will be presenting today. And also, I'm affiliated at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law in Sweden, where I've worked for many years, both in Lund University and also the Raoul Wallenberg Institute. And I was thinking today, wow, I'm very happy that I was in Sweden before coming to Morocco. And probably without that experience, I would have never been able to develop the methodology I'm talking about. Because Sweden is a place where there has been a huge investment in education, and also how the education is connected to a project of society, which was the idea of social democracy in Sweden. And this is how it was built, through a vision of education that would sustain that educational model. So my journey, very briefly, before I came into education, I was a migration scholar. So I studied migration in Europe, racial discrimination, and so I even interviewed so many people coming from Morocco many years before I even knew that I was gonna come and live here. So my expertise and what I teach in university is actually about these topics: radicalization, Islam, also integration, right? And this is how I actually developed this model. I wanted to teach to my students in a way that was inclusive, that would also connect to their reality, but in a way that was also respectful of their experience. So that's how I came to this idea that was developed over time and to which also students contributed greatly through pilot tests and different ideas that they gave me, to this model that now today I call Transformative-Emancipatory Pedagogy to Reimagine Education. And the book was developed to tackling controversies and also sensitive topics in diverse settings. And the method is very easy. You pose the problem and you discuss that together to understand from different perspectives how we see the method, the topic. That was the initial thing. Through improvisation, I would show a lot of videos to students, trying to innovate in my classroom to make this knowledge alive, knowledge that is useful for them to navigate the world. And so I will present a little bit of what I came about with this idea over the years, but also what are the future developments. And that's why we also had a call for students to come, because maybe together we can also think more broadly how this methodology, first of all, whether it's useful or not for this context, and if it is, how we can develop it together. So that's why we gave also a call for come and talk, and we hope we will have more, okay? So I see there are maybe a few students here, so I'm very happy they are in front of me, and I'm speaking directly to them. So the presentation, yeah, is designed also for you. So if at the end of this conversation I'm able to grasp your attention and attract and like make sense of some of the things you have experienced throughout your educational journey, then my presentation has been successful. So do not expect a strictly academic conversation. My methodology, after all, it's about removing lectures from education. So I was thinking today, I hope one day I can present without having to speak for an hour. So that's how I want to do it. I have two core questions, and since we are very few, that makes it more interactive. I can ask a question to everyone, and then we get back to the questions, and we keep developing them throughout the presentation, okay? I've hidden one, because I don't want you to make the connection. We build it together. The question is, what is or should be the main purpose of education? If you have one question, one answer, what this answer would be. So if we feel shy, I have post-its, but also maybe we can just be unapologetic today and really say what is for us the main goal of education, if there is one. Knowledge. Inclusivity, and the first one? Yeah. So knowledge, inclusivity, I hope I remember them all. Cognition. Behind? Decision making? Yes. Great.
Funny, because I'm only thinking about one thing. We all grew up seeing our parents talking about education to find a job. And this is the
Yeah.
other thing that I get to my mind.
Skill for the labor market. We can get back to that again, yeah?
To enhance also the process of maturity, becoming mature.
Become more mature. Okay, we're getting there together. Become more curious. So maybe I confuse you as well, because maybe we have a thinking that when kids go to school, then we want to send them to a Montessori school, so where they can develop as humans, right? And then we have to get them out of the Montessori school, which is an experience I've heard very often lately, right? And then they say also, why? The Montessori school works until you stay in the Montessori school. If you leave, you're not prepared to the world. So this is also a counter-argument for not sending kids to Montessori, even though they seem to be very good for many kids, right? So there are also differences that we associate without thinking of what should be the role of education if we go to universities or what we do before. So the main idea, anyways, is that we all have different views of what education should be about, but also we are confused as well, because there is a lot of confusion out there of what is the role of education. And I'll get back to you in a minute. So the other thing is then, what should an ideal society look like? What a society should be about, if you have to think of one thing. Can be the same, I'm thinking of what you said earlier, can be the same as education, right? So you are free to decide whatever. You don't have to choose another word, or you can, and we can discuss that later. This is a harder one. I've also added, you can also have a utopistic vision. So you can imagine a society you will love to live in, and maybe you want to build that society for yourself or for others. Yeah?
With happy people?
Happy people.
Community where you can rely on each other, like a support system.
A support system.
A safe environment?
Safe environment. You mean safe for, like what, the planet, the environment, or
Everyone.
for everyone? Okay.
I would say a place where the society is not based on finances. It's more based about our capability to do what we want to do and love to do.
Yeah.
Like, kind of where we
Insomma, si vede
same
bene,
salary,
primo.
that we all have a job,
Mm-hmm.
and things are not related to finances.
Okay. So a not market-driven society. Okay. What else?
Maybe the society should look like equitable, which means to maximize everybody's potential, regardless their race, regardless where they live. So
Yeah.
I use the word equitable
Yeah.
society should be ideal one.
Right, also in the Nordic countries, in North America nowadays, and basically everywhere. Also in Morocco today, we also talk about inclusion, equity, all these programs also in universities, schools, to make society more inclusive, educational systems more inclusive, right? So what about this? Whether the aim of education, that the aim of education is connected to social projects. So these two realities should be speaking to each other. What kind of society do we want? Then should be also related to what kind of education we will give. And this again, also to realize it, today the UNESCO and also in Morocco, I will get back to this in a minute, we speak about new social contract. How do we decide to live together from now on in times of uncertainty, in time of polarization, in times of environmental disaster, and so on, right? So we repose those questions. Those questions are, as we said, philosophical questions. What is the purpose of things? What is the goal of education? What if I said that now after our exchange? What if we could reimagine an educational model where we don't have to compromise? So, where we can still, when we can still, for instance, right, prepare the new generation to enter into the labor market and at the same time nourish their well-being, thinking that education and also universities have the role to keep helping the youth to develop as human beings. So my provocation today is to say that we don't need to compromise. We can actually have all of them together. And even more so in the sense that if combined, they work better. Because, and this is a little bit also the new discourses on also creativity in universities, more participative methods. Why? Because this allows also students to be more prepared for the labor market today. But in what then, if the main purpose of education was to help us live better with ourselves, with others, and with all living beings, the planet. So in my book and in my reflection to prepare for today, I believe that TEP could be one possible way forward. And this is how I sell it in the book. Not the only one, but capitalizing on everything that we are saying around the world, so I'm not the only one, this can be the possible way forward where we don't have to compromise on fundamental goals of education. So I call it a humanizing pedagogy for all. And as someone was saying here earlier, a pedagogy, so an educational model that allows us to become more human. So we are able to respect and love ourselves more, but also able to connect more meaningful with others. And also, while we do that, we also think of solutions for our society. So that together we think of how we can identify problems and fix them together, so to go towards a society that we want to live in. So, okay, that was already half of my presentation, but I have a presentation that I would try to do very quickly. I wanted to bring you on board and say, first, I'll go directly here, that the world is talking about a global transformation of education. And this is why I'm also here, because the IAS speaks about transition, shifts, how we move forward, how we think differently. And so then when I got this opportunity to come here, I was enthusiastic because I thought, wow, in Morocco, nowadays, I can come and be even more wild than I've been so far in trying to think differently, right? And this is what is interesting. There is a global call for transformation, but we are still in search of a solution. We don't have a solution for education. So I won't spend my part of the presentation to argue why we need to change education, but I will go towards what should be the solution. So, as I said, I will go very quickly here. The world is speaking about transforming education, and one of the leaders is the UNESCO, who also has a humanistic vision of society, where he's speaking about reimagining education for the futures, so it's plural, it's not Eurocentric, it's not in the global north, it can be also in Africa, it can be in other settings, right, in different contexts. We can reimagine together the futures. And he speaks about a new social contract, where we can come together and decide what kind of society we want to build for the future. So these kind of moments in history, they come with a lot of challenges, and AI is bringing a lot of challenges, but it's also an opportunity to reinvent. I'm sorry I'm being so optimistic, but this is how I see it. We can reimagine the future. We have everything we need. That was one of my main thinking. And it's not that I don't see injustice. The whole work that I've been trying to do my entire life was exactly to address injustice. But the solutions are there, and they are also educational solutions. So, but before, so to better justify my work here, the Conseil national de la formation, non, de l'éducation, de la formation et de la recherche scientifique. It's the organization in Morocco that is providing recommendation for the Moroccan government. It's about the same thing. It's speaking about a new contract, a new social contract for the future of Morocco. It has a name in Arabic that says the new school. So we want new schools. And again, even here, there are three different, 4, maybe 100 visions in Morocco of what education should be about. So here we could say that even the same reference is the humanistic reference of UNESCO. It's about a more inclusive education. So all their language in the report, it's about how we can build a more inclusive society in Morocco, how we move forward. So it's kind of bold. And the director of this center, the new director, she wrote a book 10 years ago called, even then, before AI became to really disrupt everything we know about education right now, is Thinking the School, Thinking Society. So the two things are interlinked. There's no doubt about that. Maybe it's more obvious for us in the field of education, but then I'm trying to convince you that this is also one main step we need to clarify if then we want to understand what purpose education should have. I complete maybe this part saying that education is also the foundation for all other shifts. So as I said earlier, the IAS is speaking about transitions. But so what is the fundamental role of education? Even though sometimes more implicitly, everyone is understanding that we need to have schools that allow the future generation to better understand the world so they can also intervene in different fields. Whatever fields they will be working on, they need to first understand the world, be creative, work together so that they can also, let's say, be relevant for the society that we cannot predict yet. The world is unpredictable. So that's the thing. Without rethinking education, our response will remain fragmented and reactive. So in order to be proactive, to give a direction to all other shifts, education becomes central. Because even the adults, we resist some changes. We owe this to a new generation. They need the skills to move forward, to reinvent the world they want to live in. So I just want to say one thing very quickly, and then I move to the model. So all these debates are clarifying a point, and everyone is agreeing on that all the traditional models of education are outdated. There have been places like in Morocco that for 30 years, maybe, or maybe more, I apologize for, they've been bringing reform to change the educational system. The whole continent is working on this. All Europe is speaking about reforming education, and the system is entirely broken. Kids don't love to go to school, school breaks them. And I'm not talking only about the ghettos. This kind of conversation started in the ghettos in the USA. where they say, okay, the school breaks minority. I mean, here we are talking about everyone. Sometimes I call my cousins in Italy who work in schools and they tell me the kids are sick, they don't want to go to school. And the COVID has just exposed that even more. So there is this idea that education is broken as we see it now. So the message is reimagining education is not optional, is essential to navigate uncertainty with dignity and justice. So, and I'm going to stop because it's like selling constantly. But this is a point I want to make, which will connect with what we hear also at UM6P. There is this new idea that the future of education here, one possible solution would be to have a model that is learning by doing. So we move away from the model where we sit and we listen for hours, and we give the students the opportunity to create projects, to learn by doing, by sharing with each other. But that, it's a provocation, is not necessarily a pedagogy. It's a method. So the pedagogy, so that you understand this very complicated term and technical that I've been using so far, is called pedagogy is the art, the science, and philosophy of teaching. So it goes again to what we think the goal of education should be about. And the clear example of this is the Montessori method. Montessori method thought that the kid's main characteristics or what we should give the kid is to develop its autonomy and freedom. That's his philosophical. Then she develops a school that will reflect that philosophy and would allow her even to test her own philosophy and see if the kid is really what she thought. And then empirically, she demonstrated that actually that was the case. And that's what made her also known around the world, not for a method, but for the vision and the translation into a method. So again, there is a connection between education and society, but also between our educational vision and the kind of methods that we are going to use. These methods can serve different purposes. They can serve the labor market, but what I'm saying here, that these methods, we can incorporate them in a broader framework that allow us to dream also of other kind of education that is not only for us to become less human. Because the labor market, that's what it does, is also confine us and define us in a term that is not necessarily what we can bring into society. And so even ourselves, we are disconnected, we are not integrated in our life. Because we live different things in different places. And sometimes we go to school and we let aside who we are. That shouldn't be anymore the goal. So, what is the solution then? Before I go to the solution, I ask if there are any questions or even if you have a solution yourself. What do you think? Yeah?
The problem we know so far is that we treat all the students in the same way in the studies community today.
Yeah.
And we think, so the teacher has to align with an average level.
Yeah.
How technology or something else could help to have a one-to-one relationship between the teacher and the students, because we don't understand the same thing, we don't have the same pace, we don't have the same interests.
Yeah.
And as long as we are considered as one, some will be ahead and some will be lost.
Yeah. So already it's called standardized methodologies, way of thinking that, like, again, there was also Montessori method, right? One problem with that is also that sometimes we put students with the same age in the same class. We said that 150 years ago that was over. There's no need for that. Why? Because if we follow our own inclination, we have different talents, different skills, different curiosity. So again, if we go to a more learner-centered model where we look into what is the real need there, then some of the energy that is taken away by classic methodologies in schools that kill creativity, like Robinson said, we can bring that energy into something different. because we are bringing the whole person into the learning process. And this is what I call holistic. We will get to here in a moment. So, okay, this is more to sell also to the IAS that is speaking about paradigms. And so, and my colleagues here that are present. So the solution to this problem, first of all, is a paradigm shift in education. So we need to forget and remove most of the things, I put it here, most of us were born and grew up in what we call a teacher-centered approach. We go to school, we sit for hours, it's standardized, the teacher speaks, we don't know what the talents are, and then we leave schools and we still don't know who we are. So that should be replaced, and it's not only about vision of society, it's also that research, everything we have looked into, is supporting that idea that the teacher-centered model should have been removed long time ago. But most of the countries in the world are still stuck in this model. Who agrees with me? Are the countries where you come from and the schools where you have been, and I'm talking even about certain private schools in Morocco, like the French schools that have the French model, you sit in the class and you listen most of the time. Who is agreeing with me? Yeah. So we made it despite this. A friend of mine, still my age, teaches in Italy, and he teaches with this method, and he knows everything about it. I co-create TEP with him because we are very close friends. And he still teaches with the teacher-centered method. And he told me, Teresa, I'm fine with it because I survive with it, and he's a very knowledgeable, known academic now. And I say, yeah, well, maybe you did thrive in that system. I thrived despite it. I existed because I did so many other things around schools that allowed me to thrive as a person. So, but then, the solution. The solution lies, according to me, in combining the other two paradigms that exist today. The UM6P is exactly doing that. It's moving from a teacher-centered paradigm into a learner-centered paradigm, where we have students doing projects, as our colleague was saying earlier, peer reviewing, also the teachers are adapting more. But most likely, we are in an hybrid. Most universities, I can tell you, even in Canada and the US and Sweden, where they are already delivering this kind of education for many, many years, in many cases, the power of knowledge, the knowledge, it still lies in the teacher, not in the student. So de facto, in the world today, we live in an hybrid world. So these paradigms are not necessarily true in the way you see them, right? So when we speak about learning by doing, like in the UM6P, we are basically in this paradigm, where there are approaches where we try to give more power to the students. We speak about deep learning, active learning, experiential learning. Are all these terms familiar with you or not? Ah, no. So maybe I'm making it too complex anyway. So, but most of the world now is shifting to the idea that we need to include students in the learning process, that it's enough to... And so, okay, am I clear enough? Do you have questions so far? Okay. There is another paradigm coexisting in the world today, and it's called critical pedagogy. And it's coming from movement, especially from Latin America, inspired by educators who fought for social justice, both priests and all the people who we tend to call the radicals, right? They were really together with people who were disenfranchised, ex-colonized, like in Latin America, Black people, they were inherited from slavery and so on, that they were still living in poor neighborhoods. The same in the US. When people are embracing a social justice approach, they would be falling into this critical pedagogy. So there are many alternative schools also in the US that have developed this method to amplify the voices of marginalized communities. So what I'm trying to say here, that instead of adding elements a method, learning by doing, or something else. We move from integrating all these beautiful initiatives coming from all over the world, and then we move to transforming. And this is what I call TEP. And TEP, which is Transformative plus Emancipatory Pedagogy, draws on traditions that want to really look into, I'm going to say that here, too many PowerPoints, too many slides, I apologize. Two things. The words come from transformative, which is the idea of Montessori and many other humanistic educators in the history that have said that the first goal of education should be about personal growth, about learning who you are, learning what your talents are, learning, so what I wrote here, the full potential of a person. So that's what I call transformative. The second school is called emancipatory and come from, as I said, from the models that have been developed in Latin America. And nowadays they are used worldwide to speak about injustice. And they are called emancipatory. So they are connected to the idea that our personal development is not only about us, it's also about creating a better society, a more just society, a society where everyone can thrive, not just the few. So just to conclude here, what I came out about is a new framework. I call it with expanded goals. As I say earlier, we don't need to compromise. It's not that if we encourage the student to develop as a person, then we are renouncing to prepare him or her to work and succeed in life. Why that should be the case? So I don't think we need to compromise. But I believe that a vision of also a person working in society, in the labor market, being an engineer or being something else, if it has the bigger picture of what a society should be, maybe also the kind of work this person would be doing would be also thinking about communities. So that if an engineer goes to Africa in a village and wants to build a school, will think about what are the needs of the community. Am I going to produce something that will worsen their life or make it better? So why this should be disconnected? So, what came out, because this was developed really at first with students in my classrooms coming from all over the world, and the first years realizing that there were experiences, racism. Right in Europe, we are experiencing this polarization. We start seeing also right-wing supremacist groups in society speaking and having the most visibility about what is the project in society, right? So like Donald Trump pushed this vision of society of a specific group to the extreme, where we say we don't care about diversity anymore. So these students come in the classroom and they hear this thing all the time. So they are affected, they are even traumatized sometimes when these kind of policies and what they experience in their everyday life, as we have many examples also in France. As there is a link between the North Africa and France, we know a lot about what's happening in France, Islamophobia and many other things, right? Anyway, so this project was developed first as a test and then students enjoy it. So I further developed it over the years and it was designed with them and for them. One thing that emerged, there were many, and you can read the book if you want, or it was relational learning. I found, and this is empirical results that I try to prove, that individual learning is very important, so that we learn how to write, that we learn how to read. But relational learning is as important as individual learning. That's where we move to collective learning, we do peer-peer. But this peer-peer is more than just helping each other. If we go to the depth of also sharing and living, learning how we can create better synergies, so we create true relationships. is not only about interacting with each other, it's about meaningful connections as well while we are learning. I'm going very fast because there's so many things that are, how you do say that, a bit too academic for the group that I'm seeing here.
When did you start to study?
Um?
When did you start to study?
Exactly, let's go to that, because I got lost. So I was saying, TEP is a way forward. And although I'm trying to selling this to you, I'm really attentive, even in my book, to explain that it's not necessarily something new that I'm inventing entirely. Like many other educators today, I've been trying to find concrete solutions in my classroom. It was a solution-driven idea. I have this problem. So and that's how I'll get to that. I have this problem. I have students who come from all over the world, and I'm giving them presentations on topics that touch their lives. And you see them, they choose the topic because I let them choose always the topic. So there was a woman, I will never forget, she became one of my greatest promoters. Maybe she's even here today because she follows me everywhere. This story is very particular. She comes from Afghanistan, and they had to leave Afghanistan because her mother was an activist in Afghanistan for the right of women to go to school. And I'm not talking about this many, many years ago. So it's a long story. And then many things happened into her life. After living in Kazakhstan, she went to live in Sweden. And she experienced racism in a society that sells itself as being very progressive and inclusive. So everything she wanted to do in the classroom is to speak, to tell stories. And so when she had to choose the topic of the presentation, she chose the Islam and the women's rights in Europe. So you see that they are driven to that. They want to speak. They want to also learn more. So university become an opportunity to understand yourself and your history more. That's for sure in this case. So after that first implementation, I asked the students, do you want to participate into pilots? So I interviewed them. We had focus group. I even used other kind of techniques that for instance, evaluations of their learning. So many methodology we use in sociology and in also education to see what was really the impact. So I can also go here to say that so that you understand that actually the work was very empirical. I first started with pilot testing, and then from this pilot testing, I came back to the theory and the philosophy. That's why I'm so convinced, because I saw it on the ground, how it works. And so the future developments will be to understanding whether this model can be also used in other contexts for other topics and not the one that I'm confident with. So the pilot studies was from 2016 to 2021. Every year I was implementing. And as the course was very much liked by students, the director at the end allowed me to remove lectures, as I said, because I removed lectures, and I had only TEP activities. So for me, we can achieve more and better with activities that are well designed, that allow to do something else. And in that, I'm inspired by Montessori. So the idea of removing what we knew and do something very different that I can describe in a minute. But what happened, and this is what I highlight for you just for the empirical. Students, after this workshop that I did on racism in Europe, had an enhanced understanding of racism. They could understand the depth, the history, the roots, I say, and also contemporary relevance. They could put a name to things. And I'm saying not only the people who were affected by those discrimination, but also the people who would be more resistant to it. For instance, Swedish students who struggle to see. So they exercise empathy and deep listening. They engage in meaningful conversations. So there were different things that were happening in the classroom that we don't see when we use the older ways of teaching. So that's where I started believing that this can be developed as a model that we can learn more from it as we go. So, but the core of this is that, as I said, I remove completely lectures. They don't exist in my courses anymore. And I do something. I borrow the first from Montessori. Prepare environment. We prepare a setting. It's not only physical. The future would be about removing all these spaces. But now we are still stuck with this. But the future will be to really remove also the settings that we have, and we create a learning environment where we have enough space. And I think that also the conference a few days ago on virtual, like also AI will bring us to that, to different experiences of learning that maybe are more impactful for us than listening to someone for hours. So I'm sure that if you were right now testing one of my TEP materials, you'll be more interested in what I'm telling you today. I hope I made you curious to test and do pilots with me. So prepare environment is something where you prepare the environment. I will keep it like that. So there are different things that I do to remove lectures and create a space that has all the goals that I was saying, that the student is engaging, he finds the meaningful what he's learning or she's learning, also inclusive, everything is there. And what was said before, it's adapted to them because they choose the topics. They choose what to talk about. I remove myself from the first 2-3 days of the workshops. They are long workshops. The first 2 days, I disappear. But how am I there? Just like Montessori did, I use her a lot, is to prepare the environment, to choose the material that will resonate with what they really want to learn. And I test it. So meaningful content is what I was saying, real-world content. We start with an issue. The case of the topic of racism was in different stages, different videos, and different things that allowed them to discuss together the topic of racism. And I use always that example because it was the most developed and also the most successful, to a point in which students told me, oh, you should do all the other activities like this one. So I owe them copywriting, I think, or something, because they helped me create this. Anyway, so a lot of interconnected activities that you may have tried already in your life, where you do interesting things in your classroom, like case studies, or you develop a project, or you go outside. Everything that today we call experiential activities. Those experiential activities are out there already. But what I'm trying to say that if we move them into a model that has more impact, that is not just an activity, but we discuss after it about what was the meaning of that experience. How did you learn? What was important? Then also we enhance what we are already doing. So the learning by doing can be reinforced by a philosophy that supports it and that make us think what we want to do with this. I conclude, and this is very important, is all the debate about inclusion in education, how we create practices that are also ethic. And this is crucial when we, for instance, speak about something that touches people's life, because that's where we become sensitive. So in Europe, if you teach to students that come from all over the world, you can expect that racism is a sensitive topic. If you move it to Morocco, another topic with a different class would be considered a sensitive topic. For instance, myself as being a European, teaching a course and expressing opinion on religion would be sensitive. We agree, right? So you see, controversies and sensitive topics change over time. But the reflection is how to be ethical, how we exchange with each other, because the teacher, as I say, almost disappears. So what is important is the relation between the students. And you know, in that space, not everyone is inclusive, like a teacher like me that is really trying to get to the heart of it. There are students that are not politically correct, but we don't want politically correctness anyhow. We want just to create spaces where we can learn from each other, but also ask meaningful questions about society and get at the heart of it. And the famous educator Paulo Freire called it, it's not sharing opinions, it's not about debating. Debate is what we do when we are just in the cognitive dimension. But when we move to a holistic experience where we are also exchanging about things that touch us in society, that affect our lives, we cannot be at the level of opinion. Because at the level of opinion, we cannot understand, especially in the case of discrimination. People who have not gone through discrimination, they cannot say, I understand that intellectually. You haven't lived it. So you have to be careful when you address those things in a context where you are surrounded by people who have experienced that. And the same goes for war, for all kinds of things that we are seeing today in our lives that they affect us. And then we cannot just go about and think about that. So what I wanted to say here is that what Paulo Freire talked about is critical dialogue. We sit together in a very attentive but also ethical way. We give rules to each other to understand, even we decide rules together of what is an inclusive space that allow us to feel respected, but also to ask difficult questions. So going back to the paradigm, because I think we lost, I try to keep track. But if the purpose of education, for instance, of academia, is to prepare us to live in this society, we cannot just learn skills. Skills are very important and they are not to be compromised. We need to become skillful in our profession. But it's not a trade-off. And the opposite, what this model is showing, that it's actually we learn more, we go deeper, we engage in more meaningful ways, like Montessori used to say. So we understand better. And we find solutions together because we learn how to work with each other. So going back to inclusion, is not only an ethical, political thing. Inclusion is also an opportunity for us to learn from each other. So it becomes also a pedagogical tool to enhance our understanding of what we are talking about. So I think I'm done with my monologue, because I have another thing, which is the future work of UM6P. But since here there are less of my colleagues and more of students and people I will not see later on, I've already adapted my speech to the people I see in the room, the nod. So I have forgotten completely all the selling part in which I'm saying how I will go further. The only thing that is interesting for you is that there is an attempt for me to also develop something here at UM6P with different pilot studies. And for that, you can also contact us. We have Jabran, the person who helped me, created a IQ, but also there is chances I can give you cards and so on. The whole idea is basically this. I will conclude with this. Okay, so the pilots are different. Some will be with using this practical method with artificial intelligence and see if this model works with artificial intelligence. Because for how successful it can be, if we don't connect it to artificial intelligence, that we lose resilience, we lose everything. So TEP is over. Like everything else, also this methodology that seems to work very well is going to be done. So one of my first goals this year is to really work with students from different disciplines and integrate everything I've been telling you with the work of artificial intelligence. So the first thing is TEP applied to artificial intelligence. So we have activities where we work more on this. But the other, I'm also thinking, if this works, then TEP as a paradigm could also be very useful to respond in the future to some of the challenges that AI will be posing. Because we need to think critically of what's going on, how society is evolving. And so, and this is the principle of Paulo Freire and the vision of education. So the pursuit of humanity cannot be carried out in isolation of individualism. but only in fellowship and solidarity, which means to come together and think how we can reshape society also through education. So this is a call, of course, for educators, scholars, community leaders, businesses, policymakers. But since here there are many students, I'm actually thinking right now that the first call is for students, because these methods are for them. They should be designed for them. So that I'm gonna move away from my position here to explaining what society should be looking like, and students themselves think together of what society they want to build. Okay, I'm done. Yeah. Giuseppe? Not yet. Yeah, thanks.
Working on the same topic.
Yeah.
And he mentions Paulo Freire, but also Lorenzo Milani,
Yes.
who were
Nice.
friends somehow, and
Yeah.
but, with the same purpose, but not the same path.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting to. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of people, but it's really important to emphasize the fact that they were talking about the poor's, but
Talking about that?
the poor's in education, the poor people in the
Yeah.
the education system. But the idea is to just to put the students into the center of the system.
Yes.
And I think you should take some papers, some leaflets, and spread them all over the
Yeah, exactly, right?
the place. Thank you anyway.
Thank you. Yes.
I would like to know
Hello?
if you tested before the model in other countries before.
If I've tried the model? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I want to know more about the results, actually.
Okay, the empirical results with the students in Sweden, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
1 second.
Also, another
Yeah.
question. What about a model, or like we can also? Sorry, it's only my personal. I'm just like thinking. Why not
I don't
using?
hear. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, because
how we can.
I'm old, you know, I can't hear it.
Come on, it's listen to me. So much. Oui.
Yeah.
What about using like a model like yeah, we can like learn it how I can say that.
Is it
No.
is it the idea of combining both the teacher
Yeah,
model and
lectures plus the TEP model.
Okay, yeah.
model. Because I believe if you are here today, it's because like all lectures that you.
Okay, okay. Okay, then for the empirical, I get back to that later.
Okay.
Just because we can also go back, as you are mentioning, to the origin of where we started. So what is the goal of education? And then from the goal of education, we move to methods of education. So if the lecture, this is my first response, but then we can move on, is still aligned with a broader vision, not that student is passive and then I'm just transmitting my knowledge, or that I'm not thinking if that person talking about inclusivity is learning the same way. I can tell you, I think I developed this thing because I don't like lecture. After 5 minutes, I'm bored and I don't listen to anymore. So if my friend of mine now has diagnosed me, because everyone is diagnosis every day, you know? What if I just have a different way of learning? And all my life was about that. I go from a field to the other, so listening to the same things all the time. So this is my diversity, right? So, but if in the lecture there is a need for lectures. So I taught in Morocco at the UER before I moved here for a course. And I was teaching, if you say, to a model that is oriented to the teacher, and then I just bring TEP, right? So there was a negotiation to do because students are not used to it. So I cannot just go with TEP all the way, which is the last paradigm. because in that, students are not used to be asked questions. They are not used to. And so you even see that when you give them exercise, they want to please you. There is this thing a little bit in Morocco, no? And also in Italy. They want to please you, so they don't take risks. So the point is not the method, but what we are encouraging students to do. So it's also the approach we have to a certain method. In my view, lectures are part of the methodology, but they come at the end. So after students have experimented with the activities, they've read the material, can be also academic when we are at least upper. And then I come to say, to connect the dots. So my expertise doesn't come first. So then I'm engaging with students all throughout, adapting to their knowledge, and then the questions that come out of the activity are posed, and usually I'm here mapping and explaining. So question coming from instance from, now I'm going to go very general, but like why there is Islamophobia in France? Why, I asked this question the other day to the student, why do you think that now the far right is very prominent all across Europe? Why in Sweden there was a progressive, inclusive society, very committed to human rights. Now you have the far, far right with neo-Nazi roots in the government. These are the kind of questions. So I cannot come as a teacher with the truth, because there are no truth in this. So the idea that society is constructed and meaning is constructed by actors. So it wouldn't be correct on my side to also come and position myself to this, you know? So there has to be a different way to navigate, at least in the context that I'm talking about of sensitive topics, in a different way, where I don't impose my view, but I can offer students the opportunity to understand also through science. So what I do is that I bring the knowledge I have of that topic afterwards, so that I can lead them to understanding the response that we have so far on these very complex topics. And even them alternative views of how research is treating the same subject. What it comes out, so I've already explained you the methodology, and what's happening with the student is that they feel more empowered, they can understand better, and as I described earlier, understanding sometimes goes deep. Because when it comes to topics like discrimination, there is a lot of resistance in society as well. So you have to remove resistance. So if I just tell you that this is happening, that there is gender discrimination, or there is Islamophobia, not everyone will understand it. So you have to create a different space where, as I said earlier, deep listening, empathy can also play a role in the learning process. Sorry, I'm very long. Because I apologize, I'm a bit tired today. So when I explain, I take 20 words instead of 10. I'm very sorry.
Thank you for your explanation. As you were explaining, a metaphor came to my mind.
Yeah.
As both a master student in socio-educative sciences, and as I tried both the banking system of education, as Paulo Freire explained in his book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, as well as in culture ed, as an alumna of that program, I tried also what I visualize as like the first step was to us to cultivate our minds. It's like when you cultivate the ground, the soil, and then a person who is expert in some field, then he comes with seeds that would help you now that you have already cultivated your brain. So it's more ready to receive and to understand more what you are going to explain. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's unfortunate because your prof are not here. But I actually had a meeting with Culture Ed a few days ago. Because And this is the other point I wanted to raise. I don't know if I answered all your questions.
Yeah.
So there is this other thing. I was in Latin America just a month, 3 weeks ago, because a friend of mine told me, you need to come to Latin America because this is the people that will understand you. In Latin America, just to talk about one example, in Colombia, they have used widely Montessori, Paulo Freire, all the innovators, to find concrete solution to how to rebuild a country destroyed by civil war for 80 years. Civil war, right? So they were the FARC in civil war for 80 years. So apparently this lady that I met, she's a lawyer, she went to Columbia University, to Teachers College, the best school in the world, they say, for education, where John Dewey and all the best educators in it, they went to Teacher College. So it's a big, important university on education. Most of the alternative models they are using today, they come from Colombia. So Colombia is a laboratory for developing what we call peace education. How do we build peace? So there are places where this innovation is happening, and this is my idea of a paradigm. There is innovation everywhere. There is innovation in-house. So I get to culture ed. So when I went to Latin America with this lady who is complicit with me, she read the book and she wants to develop things in Colombia, she tells me, Teresa, let's ask all our colleagues if there are TEP schools. So the idea is that there may be, even though they don't give it a name, already schools that are very close to what I'm talking about. Because it's happening. When a paradigm shift is happening, it's happening everywhere. It's not that someone comes and says, okay, I give it a name. No. So when I met the culture ed, I still don't know, it was just an exchange. I thought, oh, maybe we have a TEP school at UM6P. So I called my friend in Colombia and I said, maybe we found one. So we haven't found it necessary in Latin America, but maybe it's here, or maybe it's somewhere, where people like a culture ed are trying to experiment. And so they are already developing their own methodology that maybe has many of the things you said. And when we were speaking, there was this connection. So for all the others, what is culture ed? So culture ed is one year, a department, right? Where they call Inspire, no? The mall.
It's before it was Mehir Center.
Exactly.
Now it's
So, but this, yeah, the idea, right? They want to, first of all, encourage students to learn more about themselves, about communities. They have so many ingredients, I call them of TEP, that at one point, maybe after a year studying them this year, we will discover that actually we have one TEP model in Morocco already. So, but what is the additional value of what I'm trying to do? This experience, for how good, if no one is taking it out and say, this is something we can look at UM6P or elsewhere to go further, it becomes fragmented. It stays there. So you have your transformative experience and all the other students at UM6P are waiting for this and it's not coming. And this is my belief that practice is one thing. These people are practitioners. But there are also social scientists, which is my role, other roles. So we want to see what are they doing, what is the ingredients. So then we can study them, and that's then the final word of my presentation, innovation. Social innovation is about looking at the experiences that are already happening, develop more, and then say, why not? In a year, we say, in Morocco, we have developed this. Maybe people in Colombia can now integrate what we did. We integrate what they're doing, and they will integrate what they're doing. So this is the solution I'm seeing for the future for education. And this is why I end with this, because it's a collective endeavor. We need to leave niches, and science can really make the bridge. Then after this, artificial intelligence arrived, so we don't know what's going to happen, but it seems something reasonable for now. I don't know if I have convinced you or inspired you. I hope you find this useful.
Get across the experience in Nicaragua, because they had the first budget of the state was education for several years,
Uh-huh.
I think like 3% of the budget, and then maybe 5, 10 years ago they started to have violence, so they didn't have an army. They
Yeah.
didn't- and now they had violence coming, and they had to shift their investment from education to the army.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you found them on your path during your investigations.
No, so I have not investigated on Latin America yet, but I'm creating partnership with Latin America now. I actually had this too. There was more for our colleagues, but I can explain that later for what I'm going to do here. So when I was in Latin America, this book was my test, was to say, okay, if these people who are already innovating, they find it useful and they want to integrate, that's where we create synergies. And so I have actually connections that I hope to develop projects with them in these countries, Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Brazil, and so on. And it's different levels, it's happening at different levels. So what happened is that when I was in Costa Rica, where the conference was, I was with the taxi driver. I like to talk with the people.
Sorry, it's Costa Rica.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking, it's the same.
Sorry.
And the person tells me, he was surprised that I knew about politics in Latin America, which I know very little, but I say that Morocco is a very safe country, but also, right, there are no gangs, because of a very different context. And he was saying, yeah, our problem is that we have gangs. We shouldn't have a military because we don't know what to do anymore. Right? So, but that's the thing also, polarization makes people shift. And that's where I think that we need more of TEP, I hope. Because I spoke with a colleague in Canada. Now I want to go to Canada as well to sell this because I did my PhD there. And some of my ideas about inclusion, diversity, like a safe society came from living in Quebec, was very nice when I was there. And a friend of mine told me the other day, which was very interesting, she said, yeah, we need TEP, not TEP, could be other models there. Because also in Canada now we are polarized. When I was there 10 years ago, it wasn't like that. So new challenges I had, a new way of thinking, and then also what is the role of education then? For me, this kind of model should be also, just like I was speaking about war and peace education, and that was actually at the core of TEP, is that we should also use education to reduce polarization, to reduce radicalization. So even though it's not my role as a teacher, since in every course I always had a far-right guy. There are also far-right women, but in that case, they are far-right supremacists. And at the end of the course, in the course evaluation, you always see the claim. And then I'm thinking, okay, in Sweden, people who are radicalized in the far right, usually what they're doing, they're buying houses and they all live in the same neighborhood. So they live with each other. So if I only have one opportunity in my classroom to expose that person to a different view of the world, even if I don't change it, I still have had the chance to do it. You see what I mean? So I'm thinking in this kind of ways. I'm just bringing you into my dream of how education could really be a tool for many solutions. And that's why I'm saying, yes, we live in times of challenges, but also, as Paulo Freire said, there is also hope. And hope, again, him, is not optimism. It's not telling you that this world is easy, that when we leave IAS-UM6P, problems are not solved in Morocco, in Africa, or wherever we will go back after this experience. No, it's that hope, as he said, is built by action, by coming together, finding solutions, and then reinvent the world in order to the world to adjust to our needs and not the other way around. Thank you so much.